Yes, welcome to the story and welcome to Friday. You know, Fridays are times for wrapping things up, and so we're going to wrap up our week-long series on tainted water in eastern Oregon. We've been talking about a lot of stuff throughout the nights, but tonight we're going to be focusing on reaction. I'll tell you about problems with nitrates in the groundwater in the Willamette Valley as well, from Corvallis south almost to Eugene. Clean water, it's our big story tonight. Most of us take clean water for granted, I think, and if you're connected to a city water supply, it probably is safe. But there are thousands of people around Oregon who live too far from cities. They use backyard wells that tap into underground aquifers for their drinking water, and in some areas that water is contaminated. It's a growing problem across the country. In eastern Oregon, the problem is most severe in Morrow and Umatilla counties, where as many as 12,000 people, mostly low income, are exposed to potentially dangerous water. They have little political power. The water is contaminated with nitrates, which can hurt babies and pregnant women, and over many years can cause cancer and other issues for anyone exposed. We explained in our reports that the state of Oregon has known about the problem for at least 33 years without making any meaningful change. In fact, the pollution was worse now than when it was first discovered. It was only last year, after Morrow County declared an emergency, that the state sort of started paying attention. Now wells are being tested and water delivered for people with high nitrate pollution in their drinking water. But for decades, state regulators have allowed industries which are polluting to consider voluntary steps to curb the pollution. That has failed for 33 years now. The state, by the way, has not pushed back, has not required farmers to cut back on fertilizers, has not required food processors at the Port of Morrow and elsewhere to cut back on the wastewater they spread on fields, has not required feedlots to cut back either. This week, I've been trying to get in touch with the governor's office, the DEQ, the EPA, for some reaction and for steps that they're taking to solve this problem now. The EPA said it will likely talk to me, but we don't have a firm time yet to talk to the regional administrator. The DEQ also told me I might be able to get an interview with the director, but again, nothing set yet. And just this afternoon, the governor's office sent me an email detailing the steps that she has taken in regards to contaminated water since she took office. Much of it has to do with this directive from her office from April, directing state agencies to coordinate their responses in the area. Things like free well testing and water delivery. They tell us the governor pushed for $7 million for testing, treatment, and water delivery spread out over several agencies and got the money from the legislature. In a statement, the governor says every Oregonian should have safe, healthy drinking water. My message to residents is this: the work will continue. If we missed you or you weren't home, you can still get your water tested. You will continue to see messages from the OHA about testing, water delivery, and treatment. Call 211 to make an appointment to get your well tested today. We also asked you for your feedback on the issue. You did not disappoint. Some of you mentioned politics. Rob wrote in to say, the politics of the groundwater problem in the east is frankly infuriating. Sure, that part of the state is very right-wing, but so what? The state should just bring the hammer down on the polluters. What are they going to do? Vote Republican? Gonna happen anyway, so just do it. Don had a slightly different take. The Morrow County Commission chair declared a public health emergency. What was the result? He was recalled. The exact people you're talking about being injured collectively rejected the person trying to highlight the problems to solve the problems. So I tend to agree with those who have shared these people want no government telling them what to do, even though they know they have a problem. Some of you also were not impressed with the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality, which technically is in charge of fixing the pollution problem in Morrow and Umatilla counties. But DEQ has not taken steps that would bring the pollution down in the groundwater there.
As far as DEQ, they seem riddled with a groupthink, aversion to risk, and failures of imagination. They simply have neglected their duty to protect our waters, our airs, watersheds, airsheds, groundwater. I'm really disappointed in the environmental regulators.
Thanks for your comment. Starr agreed, writing in to say they think that gathering and talking will keep the public off their back, I guess. This is a time for getting as much information as possible around problems, but then real leaders need to come up with solutions and timelines, and they stay on it until it's done. Too many people and agencies have their hands in so many different pockets and are unwilling to stop the runaway train. Where are the leaders?
Regarding the water issue and the water regulators in Eastern Oregon, it makes me wonder if they're falling down on the job so badly for the last 25 to 30 years. How do we trust them that the water even west in Oregon is okay?
Well, that's an excellent question, and we'll get to a major problem on the west side in just a moment. But first, several of you wanted to know about the fruits and vegetables grown in that area.
We wonder about the effect of the nitrates on the actual produce that's coming out of the ground, the onions and the potatoes. I don't know if that's been looked at or not, but we're curious.
We and probably everyone else is wondering about the famous watermelons that come from Hermisted, and we are wondering if that groundwater that's contaminated with nitrate is going to contaminate the watermelons that we eat every year.
Those are terrific questions, and I thought the Oregon Department of Agriculture would be full of experts that could answer the question, but when I asked for an interview, they pointed me to the EPA, and eventually I found my way to the Oregon Health Authority. David Ferrer is a public health toxicologist. He has our answer.
It's definitely taking them in. In fact, that's why we apply fertilizer to the ground, right? Because plants need nitrogen in order to make protein and convert that nitrogen into a form that we benefit from in the form of protein. So nitrates is part of how plants are actually very efficient at absorbing nitrates and other forms of nitrogen from the soil, and that's actually critical for their health. Like plants can't grow without it, and that's why in agriculture it's applied to the soil in the first place. So plants have a really good way to regulate the amount of nitrates that are in them. So once they absorb it, if there's more nitrates in the soil than they need, they can just stop absorbing it, or they can and they can even help to convert that to nitrogen that goes into the air, like into atmosphere, which is, what most of Earth's atmosphere is nitrogen gas. So, the quick answer to your question is that they are absorbing it, but that's not a health risk. All vegetables contain some nitrates. Under normal conditions, 80% of the nitrates that we get is through our diet, and that's mainly through vegetables. A much higher source of nitrates in diet is from cured meats, like hot dogs, bacon. That has much higher nitrate levels than vegetables do.
So yes, some nitrates in the fruits or vegetables, but really not enough to worry about. And he said it's much different than a glass of contaminated water, for example, which has much higher levels of nitrates going into your body several times a day, every day. By the way, did you hear what he said about bacon? I liked bacon so much before I learned it's probably bad for me. Anyway, back to our topic. Some of you wondered if the nitrates in Eastern Oregon are seeping into the Columbia River, since it's in places like Boardman, which are right next to the river. Well, I talked with a retired DEQ water expert who told me there might be some seepage, but the volume of the water in the Columbia makes it really a non-issue in his opinion. Now, getting back to the question of whether there are problems closer to the Willamette Valley, here's a voicemail that caught our attention.
I, in a professional capacity some years ago, found high nitrates in well water in the Willamette Valley sites south of Albany. Pretty tall stuff, so you might want to check that out. I think our nitrate problem goes further than just Umatilla County.
That is exactly right. Here's a map of the southern Willamette Valley groundwater management area. It was set up in 2004 because of high nitrate contamination found in the groundwater of land that covers 230 square miles there. 93% of the land is in farming. It starts just north of Eugene and includes the cities of Coburg, Junction City, Harrisburg, Monroe, and parts of Corvallis. What that means is if you get your drinking water from a well in those areas, you should probably get it tested. There's a chance that you have elevated levels of nitrates in your water, and you won't be able to see or taste them. This report from 2019 is part of the state's website on that area. It shows that despite greater awareness of the issue, groundwater nitrate contamination increased over the last 14 years, with the average monitoring well now falling above the state of Oregon's action level of 7 parts per million. The EPA, by the way, says above 10 parts is bad. The state has that lower 7 parts per million limit. So what's happening there? Well, voluntary efforts are in place to try and bring down the pollution. There's also a third groundwater management area in northeastern Malheur County. That area is also mainly farming, and it's also under voluntary suggestions to try to bring down the pollution there. Now, some of you asked about areas with nitrate contamination in Washington state. I only found one, and it's in the lower Yakima Valley. The state is giving people there free drinking water. A few of you also had ideas for cleaning things up over in Morrow and Umatilla counties. A viewer who wants to stay anonymous wrote, "I am a former regulator in a department where we had no civil penalties, so we had to be creative. If regulators really were serious about this nitrate problem, they would place a tax on every farmer who used nitrate fertilizer to provide filtration for all the residents that have been affected by this pollution." And RD writes in to say the state needs to create new laws where all polluters from the county, the large corporations, the farmers, and the ranchers putting nitrates into the groundwater must pay into a fund to provide reverse osmosis filtration systems for the drinking water of all the people affected. Do this now to buy some time to address the problem in its entirety. Okay, thanks for all those comments. And here's my opinion on all this. First, the reason that we did this story, these series of stories, is because people with little to no political power in our state are being ignored by state regulators who should be helping them. They are crying out for environmental justice. And so far, our leaders have been deaf. It's time that changed. Everyone who lives in our state, in any of our states, deserves to have clean water. And this should not be an East Oregon versus West Oregon thing. I just showed you there's a lot of nitrate contamination in the Willamette Valley between Eugene and Corvallis. Now, I realize that things happened in the past that may not be happening now. I talked yesterday to a man who told me he used to farm around the Hermiston area in the 70s. And he said they used lots and lots of fertilizer, and they only checked the first foot of soil to see how deep that was going. It's not that they didn't care about polluting the aquifer, it just never occurred to them. Farmers today will tell you they are much more careful, but under Oregon's current rules, we have to take their word for that. In my opinion, that's something that needs to change as well. In those fragile areas where the groundwater is already contaminated, the state should require farmers to report exactly what fertilizer they're using, when they're using it, and how much of it they're using. Farming is still the #1 cause of the pollution by a mile, and it's time that state regulators had the guts to stand up to that industry. Second, no state laws regulate domestic wells, what we've been calling backyard wells. So that should change as well. Without that, the state has no idea where many of these things are and no idea what sort of contaminants they may be tapping into. Since they don't know that, they can't protect the people who are drinking that water. Also, the state should stand up to the commercial food companies and the corporations like the Port of Morrow, which send out billions of gallons of nitrate water a year. In my opinion, the state should require them to reduce their volume by at least 10%, just as a starting point, and then consider that amount as we move on. Now listen, these are not popular ideas. It'll take the sort of courage that Oregon lawmakers, frankly, have not shown up to this point. But there's an old adage that says if you keep doing what you've always done, you'll keep getting what you always got. Nitrate contamination in groundwater is a serious problem in Oregon and around the country. If Oregon's elected leaders cannot rise to the challenge, then the federal government needs to come in and use their power to clean up the water. The people of our state deserve better than they're getting now. It's way past time for that to change. At least that's my opinion. You don't have to agree. Am I full of it? I could be. I mean, I don't think so, but I'm open to your arguments. What do you think about all this? I know you've been sending your thoughts all week, but here's another chance. Email us, will you? Let us know what you're thinking. The address is thestory@kgw.com or call and leave a voicemail, 503-226-5090. And by the way, plenty of you have been very nice and sent in kind messages throughout the week, like this one from Judy.
Your reporting is incredible. I watch the show every night. I wish our governor would watch it. I wish these reports were sent to our state government, our local government. They should all be forced. It should be mandatory that they watch these reports. We're informed. We're happy about some and very, very sad about most. We need action, and I think that's our main problem. We need action. We want action.
Thank you, Judy. Rob wrote in to say, really appreciate this series on the contaminated groundwater in Eastern Oregon. First-rate reporting, which is getting more and more scarce lately. Bravo. And we'll end with this one from Caroline. Thank you so much for covering this story. Your detailed journalism will hopefully gain the attention of our governor and state leaders. You've opened a light for me on this issue, and for many others. I will now be writing to my urban state legislators and Oregon's governor to request they address the contamination with real results in real time. Keep up the great work. Thanks, Caroline. And don't let Caroline be the only one to bring this issue up with elected leaders. Our plan was to put up email addresses for the governor's office, Oregon DEQ, and the EPA. But guess what? None of those agencies make it easy with a centralized address for public opinion or concerns. A quick Google search on each one of them, though, will bring you to a Contact Us form that you can fill out and send their way. And we encourage you to do that. We hope that as you're as candid with them as you are with us. We really believe it can make a difference.